My 13-year-old sister, Lily, loved our new house. It was small but cozy, with a big backyard and a quiet street. The only problem was our neighbor, Mr. Grayson. He lived alone in the house next door, and from the moment we moved in, he gave me the creeps. It started with small things. He'd stand at his window, staring at our house for hours. Sometimes I'd catch him watching Lily play in the yard. I told my parents, but they brushed it off. "He's just lonely," my mom said. "Don't be rude." Then the gifts started. One day, Lily found a doll on our porch. It was old, with cracked porcelain and a faded dress. A note attached read, "For the sweet girl." Lily thought it was cute, but I threw it away. The next day, another doll appeared, and another, each one creepier than the last. I confronted Mr. Grayson. He smiled, a thin, unsettling grin, and said, "I just want to be friends." I told him to stay away from Lily, but he just laughed. Things got worse. Lily started hearing noises at night, tapping on her window, footsteps outside her door. She'd wake up screaming, but when we checked, no one was there. One night I saw him. Mr. Grayson was standing in our yard, staring up at Lily's window. I yelled, and he disappeared into the shadows. The police came, but without proof, they couldn't do much. They told us to lock our doors and call if he came back, but he didn't stop. Lily found more dolls in her room, even though the windows were locked. One had her name carved into its chest. I started following him. He'd leave his house at night and wander the neighborhood, peeking into windows. I took pictures and showed the police, but they said it wasn't enough. "He hasn't done anything illegal," they said. One night, I woke up to Lily screaming. I ran to her room and found her clutching a doll. Its eyes were gouged out, and its mouth was sewn shut. A note read, "You're mine now." I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, Mr. Grayson was gone. We moved out the next week. Lily hasn't been the same since. She still has nightmares, and she refuses to sleep alone. As for Mr. Grayson, he's still out there. Sometimes I drive by the old house. The lights are always off, but I swear I see him in the window, smiling that same twisted smile. I moved to the countryside for peace, but my neighbor, Mr. Hargrove, made that impossible. He was an old man with a hunched back and a face like stone. At first, he seemed harmless, just a recluse who wandered the woods. But then the weird things started. Every night, around midnight, I'd hear footsteps outside my window. I'd look, but no one was there. Then I noticed a flickering light deep in the woods. One night, I followed it. What I saw still haunts me. Mr. Hargrove stood in a clearing, surrounded by candles arranged in a circle. In the center was a pile of sticks, or bones. He was chanting something low and guttural. I stepped on a twig, and his head snapped up. He smiled, a wide, toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. I ran. The next morning, I asked about him at the local diner. The waitress lowered her voice. "Folks say he's into witchcraft, or worse. Stay away." I tried, but the noises got louder. One night, I woke to find a wooden doll on my porch. It was crude, faceless, and smelled like smoke. I threw it away, but it kept reappearing, on my table, in my kitchen, even in my bed. I confronted Mr. Hargrove. He denied everything, but warned, "This land doesn't like outsiders." That night, I packed my bags and left. But even at the motel, I found the doll waiting for me. My neighbor, Mr. Voss, always gave me the creeps. He lived alone in the apartment across the hall, and he had this way of looking at you. like he was staring straight into your soul. I tried to avoid him, but he always found a way to corner me. It started with small things. He'd leave strange gifts at my door. Black candles, jars of red liquid, and notes with symbols I didn't recognize. I threw them away, but they kept coming. Then he started inviting me over. "I'm having a gathering," he'd say with a sly smile. "You should join us." I always said no, but he never stopped asking. One night I came home late from work and found him waiting in the hallway. He was wearing a long black robe and his eyes gleamed in the dim light. "You're special," he said, stepping closer. "I can feel it. You belong with us." I pushed past him and locked my door, but I could hear him laughing on the other side. Things escalated. I started hearing chanting late at night, low and guttural, coming from his apartment. The smell of burning herbs filled the hallway, and I'd find strange markings scratched into my door. I told the landlord, but he just shrugged. "He's a weird guy, but he pays his rent on time." One evening, I was taking out the trash when Mr. Voss appeared out of nowhere. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, and pulled me toward his apartment. "It's time," he hissed. "You'll see the truth." I struggled, but he was too strong. He dragged me inside and slammed the door. His apartment was a nightmare. The walls were covered in symbols and candles flickered on every surface. In the center of the room was a table with a black cloth and a knife. He pushed me onto the table and started chanting, his voice rising as he raised the knife. I screamed, but no one came. Then, just as he brought the knife down, the door burst open. It was Mrs. Carter, the elderly woman who lived next door. She swung her cane at Mr. Voss, hitting him in the head. He stumbled, and I scrambled off the table. Mrs. Carter called the police, and they arrested Mr. Voss. When they searched his apartment, they found more than just the altar. Photos of me, locks of hair, and a journal detailing his plans to sacrifice the chosen one. I moved out the next day. Mrs. Carter moved too, saying she couldn't stay in a place like that. Mr. Voss is in prison now, but I still have nightmares. Sometimes I wake up hearing his voice, whispering those same words. "You belong with us." When I was 14, I thought Mr. Daniels was the only person who cared about me. School was hell. I was the quiet girl with glasses who got picked on every day. The other kids called me names, shoved me into lockers, and laughed when I cried. But Mr. Daniels noticed. He'd pull the bullies aside, tell them to stop, and check on me after class. "You're special," he'd say. "Don't let them get to you." I believed him. He was my English teacher, the one adult who seemed to understand me. When he asked me to stay after school to help him with the drama club, I said yes. I thought it was safe. I thought he was safe. At first, it was fine. We'd work on scripts, organize costumes, and talk about books. He'd tell me how talented I was, how much potential I had. But then things changed. He started standing too close, brushing against me when he didn't need to. His compliments felt different. He'd say I was mature for my age, and that he admired me. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed quiet. One day, he asked me to stay later than usual. "I need your help with something important," he said. I agreed, like always, but this time he locked the classroom door. My stomach dropped, but I told myself I was overreacting. He was my teacher. He wouldn't do anything wrong. I was wrong. He started by touching my shoulder, then my hair. I froze, my heart pounding. "You're so special," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. I tried to pull away, but he grabbed my wrist. "Don't be scared," he said. "This is what trust looks like." I don't remember how I got out of there. I just remember running, out of the classroom, down the hall, out of the school. I didn't stop until I got home. I locked myself in my room and cried until I couldn't breathe. The next day, I told my parents. They didn't believe me. "Mr. Daniels is a respected teacher," my dad said. "You must have misunderstood." My mom said I was being dramatic, that I was too sensitive. I tried to tell the principal, but without proof, nothing happened. Mr. Daniels kept teaching, and I kept seeing him in the hallways, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I switched schools after that, but the damage was done. I couldn't trust anyone. Not teachers, not friends, not even my parents. I started wondering if it was my fault. Was I cursed? Did I do something to make him think I wanted whatever that was? Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that I'm broken. I see his face in my dreams, hear his voice telling me I'm special. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. All I know is that the teacher I thought I could trust took something from me that day, and I'll never get it back.